September 3rd, 1940. 14:37 hours. Skies over the English Channel. Flight Lieutenant Andrew "Andy" McNair, 23 years old, from Winnipeg, Manitoba, was flying a Hawker Hurricane Mark I that was actively on fire, missing half its left wing, and had approximately 4 minutes of fuel remaining before the engine quit completely and he fell into the cold waters of the Channel, where survival time was measured in minutes, not hours. The Hawker Hurricane Mark I. Serial number V7467. One of the forgotten heroes of the Battle of Britain. While the Spitfire got all the glory, all the photographs, all the legends, it was the Hurricane that did most of the actual fighting. Slower than the Spitfire, less maneuverable, but tougher. More stable as a gun platform, easier to repair. And in September 1940, when Britain stood alone against the Luftwaffe, the Hurricane squadrons shot down more German aircraft than all other British defenses combined. The Hurricane was powered by a Rolls-Royce Merlin III engine, producing 1,030 horsepower at 16,250 feet. Maximum speed, 318 miles per hour at 17,500 feet. Service ceiling, 36,000 feet. Armament, 8 Browning .303 machine guns, 4 in each wing, synchronized to concentrate fire at 250 yards. Weight empty, 4,670 pounds. Maximum takeoff weight, 6,600 pounds. Range, 425 miles with internal fuel only. Andy's Hurricane had approximately 17 miles of range left, maybe less. The fuel gauge was fluctuating wildly because the tank had been punctured by a 7.92 millimeter round from a Messerschmitt Bf 109E, and fuel was streaming out behind him like blood from an arterial wound, vaporizing in the slipstream, creating a visible trail that any German fighter could follow straight to him. But that wasn't even his biggest problem. His biggest problem was that he was 15 miles from the English coast, flying at 8,000 feet with an engine that was losing power by the second, a control surface that barely responded because the aileron cables on the left side had been severed, and a fire in the starboard fuel tank that was slowly eating through the aluminum structure of the wing. And he was alone, completely alone. His squadron had been scattered during the dogfight. 6 Hurricanes from No. 242 Squadron RAF, the Canadian squadron, though technically it was RAF with mostly Canadian pilots, had intercepted a formation of 30 Heinkel HE-111 bombers escorted by 40 Bf 109 fighters over Dover. The math was simple and terrible. 6 against 70. They had attacked anyway. Because that was the job. Because Britain was losing. Because if the Germans achieved air superiority, invasion would follow. And if Britain fell, Canada would be fighting alone on the western side of the Atlantic, with America still neutral and unwilling to enter the war. So 6 Hurricanes had attacked 70 German aircraft, and Andy had shot down 2 Heinkels, confirmed, witnessed by his wingman before they got separated, before a Bf 109, piloted by someone very good, had gotten on his tail and proceeded to systematically destroy his aircraft with precision that was almost respectful in its thoroughness. 20mm cannon rounds. The Bf 109E carried 2 MG-FF cannons plus 2 MG-17 machine guns. The cannon rounds were the killers, high explosive. When they hit, they didn't just puncture, they detonated. Andy had felt 3 impacts. One had taken off a chunk of his left wing, destroying the aileron and making the Hurricane want to roll left constantly. One had punctured the fuel tank. The third had started the fire. He should have bailed out. That was protocol. Aircraft on fire bail out immediately before the fire reaches the main fuel tank or the hydraulic lines and the entire thing explodes in a fireball that gives you maybe half a second of consciousness to realize you're being cremated alive. But Andy didn't bail out, for two reasons. First, they were over the channel. Water temperature in September was approximately 15 degrees Celsius. Survival time, maybe 20 minutes if you weren't injured, less if you were. The Mae West life jacket would keep you floating, but cold water kills through hypothermia faster than most people realize. Your core temperature drops, your muscles stop working, you lose consciousness. You drown while still wearing a life vest because you can't keep your head up anymore. And rescue? The RAF's Air-Sea Rescue Service was overwhelmed. Dozens of pilots in the water, not enough boats, not enough time. Your chances of being picked up before you died from exposure were maybe 1 in 4. Maybe. Second reason Andy didn't bail out, and this one was more complicated. His younger brother, Thomas, was down there. Tommy McNair, 19 years old, also from Winnipeg, also in the RAF. But Tommy wasn't a pilot. He was a radar operator at RAF Hawkinge, the forward airfield on the coast. Tommy had written Andy a letter 2 weeks ago. It was in Andy's jacket pocket right now, stained with sweat and fear. The letter said, "The bombing is bad, Andy. Really bad. Last night they hit the barracks. Killed 7 men I knew. I'm scared. But I keep thinking, you're up there fighting them. If you can be brave, so can I. Don't let them through, brother. We're counting on you." Andy couldn't bail out into the channel, because if he did, the hurricane would crash into the sea and be lost. And while one hurricane didn't matter in the grand scheme of the battle, Andy knew something most people didn't. Britain was running out of fighters. The factories were producing new aircraft, but not fast enough. Losses were averaging 15 fighters per day. Production was 12. The math was simple. Every day, Britain had 3 fewer fighters than the day before. That trajectory ended in defeat. Every hurricane that made it back to base was a hurricane that could fly tomorrow, and the day after, until it couldn't. But that was tomorrow's problem. Today's problem was staying alive for the next 4 minutes. Andy checked his instruments. Altimeter, 7,800 feet. Airspeed, 190 miles per hour, and dropping as the engine lost power. Fuel pressure, almost 0. Oil pressure, fluctuating. Coolant temperature, red line. The Merlin engine was cooking itself. Distance to coast, 14 miles. At current speed and rate of descent, he would be over land with approximately 500 feet of altitude remaining. Maybe, if the engine didn't quit first, if the fire didn't reach something critical, if the wing didn't fold. He tried the radio. "Mayday! Mayday! Mayday! Hurricane V7467, engine failure and fire, attempting to reach Hawkinge. Mayday!" Static. The radio was dead. Either the battery was hit or the antenna was shot away. He was transmitting to nobody. Andy looked at the fire. It had spread. The entire starboard wing root was burning now. He could see flames through gaps in the aluminum skin. The metal was glowing cherry red. The fire was eating through the main spar, the structural beam that held the wing to the fuselage. If that spar failed, the wing would separate. The hurricane would enter an uncontrollable spin. At this altitude, he'd have maybe 12 seconds to bail out before ground impact. 12 seconds. Not a lot of time to unbuckle harness, jettison the canopy, climb out against G-forces, and pull the ripcord. Most pilots who tried to bail out from spinning aircraft died still in the cockpit because they ran out of time. Andy made a decision. He would fly the hurricane as long as it stayed together. He would get as close to land as possible, and if the wing started to fold, he would aim the aircraft at something German. There were German positions all along the French coast across the Channel. If he was going to die, he might as well be useful about it. But first, he had to deal with the fire. There was a fire extinguisher system in the Hurricane, a single carbon dioxide bottle that could discharge into the engine compartment. It was designed for engine fires, not wing fires, but it was all Andy had. He pulled the fire extinguisher handle, heard the hiss of CO2 discharging, watched through the mirror mounted on the canopy frame. The fire didn't go out. It barely even dimmed, because the fire wasn't in the engine compartment. It was in the wing structure, fed by fuel vapor and hydraulic fluid and hot metal. CO2 couldn't reach it. Andy's hands were shaking on the stick, not from fear, though he was terrified, but from fatigue. He'd been flying combat for 6 hours today, 2 sorties, 3 dogfights. His muscles were exhausted, his nerves were fried, and now he was trying to fly a crippled, burning aircraft that wanted to roll left and dive into the ocean. He looked at the altimeter, 7,000 feet. The coast was visible now. White cliffs, England, home, so close. The engine coughed, sputtered. The propeller windmilled. Power dropped to almost nothing. Andy switched fuel tanks. The reserve tank. It had maybe 2 gallons, maybe 3. Enough for 4 minutes at cruise power, less at combat power. But he wasn't in combat anymore. He was just trying to survive. The engine caught again, coughed, ran rough, but it ran. The propeller bit air. He maintained altitude, barely. 13 miles to coast, 6,800 feet, still descending. Andy talked to himself, out loud, because silence in the cockpit was dangerous. Silence let the fear in. Let the imagination show you all the ways you were about to die. Come on, girl. Stay together. Just a little longer. We're almost home. Tommy's down there. Can't let him see his brother fall out of the sky. Can't do that to him. So stay together. Stay together. The Hurricane shuddered. The fire had reached something structural. Andy felt it through the stick. The aircraft's handling changed. It was looser, sloppier, like flying through mud. The left wing was failing. Not catastrophically, not yet, but the spar was weakening. The metal was losing strength. At some point, aerodynamic forces would exceed structural capacity, and the wing would fold upward like paper. Andy dropped the nose. Reduced angle of attack. Less lift meant less stress on the damaged wing. It also meant faster descent. But he had to balance. Too much stress, and the wing folds. Too much descent, and he hits the water. 12 miles, 6,000 feet. He could see details now. Individual buildings, roads, a convoy of trucks, British, moving supplies. They'd hear his engine, look up, see a Hurricane on fire. Probably assume he was dead already. 11 miles, 5,500 feet. The engine was running on fumes now. The fuel pressure gauge was on 0. He was flying on vapor and prayers. The Merlin coughed again. The propeller slowed, windmilling. No power. Andy's stomach dropped. This was it. Glide range from 5,000 feet was maybe 6 miles. He was 11 miles out. He wasn't going to make it. But he tried anyway. Because what else was there? He trimmed the Hurricane for best glide speed, 105 miles per hour. The speed that gave maximum distance for altitude lost. The aircraft was a glider now. A burning, crippled glider with half a wing and no power. But it could still fly. Barely. 10 miles, 4,000 feet. Andy could see Hawkinge now, the airfield where Tommy worked, runways, control tower, dispersal areas, so close. The fire was all along the wing now. The entire right side of the aircraft was burning. Smoke filled the cockpit. Andy pulled his oxygen mask on, breathed from the emergency bottle. His eyes watered. The smoke was toxic. Burning aluminum, burning hydraulic fluid, burning rubber. 9 miles, 3,000 feet. He could bail out now. Over land, good chance of survival. But the hurricane would crash, would burn, would be lost. And Andy thought about Tommy's letter. Don't let them through, brother. 8 miles, 2,500 feet. The hurricane was breaking apart. He could hear it, metal groaning, rivets popping. The airframe was being held together by welds and luck, and neither would last much longer. 7 miles, 2,000 feet. Hawkinge was ahead, but he was too low, too far, not going to make the runway, going to crash short, into houses, civilian homes, people who'd already been bombed enough. Andy looked for alternatives, saw a field, farmland, freshly plowed, soft earth, empty. 6 miles, 1,500 feet. He aimed for the field, set up approach. No flaps, the hydraulics were gone. No landing gear, the system was destroyed. Belly landing, which in a hurricane usually worked. The aircraft was built tough. Pilots walked away from belly landings all the time, usually, when the aircraft wasn't on fire and missing parts of the wing. 5 miles, 1,000 feet. The left wing folded. Not completely, not catastrophically, but the weakened spar bent upward 30 degrees. The hurricane snap-rolled left. Andy instinctively corrected with right stick and right rudder. The aircraft rolled back level. But now it was flying crooked. The lift was asymmetric. He had to hold full right stick just to fly straight. 4 miles, 700 feet. His arms were screaming. Holding full deflection against the aerodynamic forces required strength he barely had. But he held it, because what choice was there? 3 miles, 500 feet. The field was ahead, big enough. Maybe. He'd come in fast. No flaps meant high landing speed. Maybe 120 miles per hour. In a burning aircraft with structural damage. This was going to hurt. 2 miles, 300 feet. He cleared the last line of trees. The field was ahead. Plowed earth. Rough, but survivable. 1 mile, 200 feet. Andy pulled the canopy jettison handle. The Perspex canopy blew away in the slipstream. Fresh air. Smoke cleared. He could see. Half mile, 100 feet. He cut the magnetos, killed the engine completely. No spark. Reduced fire risk. The propeller windmilled to a stop. The hurricane was a glider again, for the last time. Quarter mile, 50 feet. Andy pulled back on the stick. Flared. The nose came up. Speed bled off. 110 miles per hour. 100. 90. The tail touched first, then the fuselage. Metal screamed against earth. The aircraft bounced, came down again, harder, bounced again, and then it was sliding, belly down, plowing through soft earth, throwing up huge waves of dirt, decelerating hard. 4 Gs, 5. Andy was thrown forward against his harness. His head snapped forward, his vision tunneled. The hurricane slid 300 yards, slowing. The fire was spreading. Flames were everywhere now. The cockpit was heating up. Andy could feel it through his boots. 200 yards, 100, 50. The aircraft stopped. Andy's hands moved automatically. Training. Procedure. 4-point harness release. Click. Free. He stood up in the cockpit. His legs barely supported him. Adrenaline crash. He climbed out, fell off the wing, hit the ground hard, rolled, got up, ran. 20 yards from the hurricane. 30, 40. The fuel tank exploded. The Hurricane V7467 disappeared in a fireball that rose 200 feet into the air. The blast wave knocked Andy flat. Heat washed over him like opening an oven. Pieces of burning metal rained down. Andy lay in the plowed earth, breathing hard, watching his aircraft burn. The hurricane that had carried him home, that had held together just long enough, that had saved his life. It burned for 20 minutes. By the time the fire brigade arrived from Hawkinge, there was nothing left but twisted metal and ash. Andy was found by a Home Guard patrol. 2 farmers with World War I rifles. They'd seen the crash, ran to help, found a Canadian pilot sitting in a field, covered in dirt and oil, watching his aircraft burn. "You all right, son?" one of them asked. Andy looked at him, tried to speak, couldn't. His throat was too tight. He nodded. "That was quite a landing," the farmer said. "Thought you were done for. We all did." Andy found his voice. "Is this near Hawkinge?" "About 2 miles south. You can see the airfield from here." "I need to get there. My brother works there. He needs to know I'm alive." They drove him in a truck. Ancient Bedford. When they arrived at the airfield gate, the guard took one look at Andy, burned, bleeding, barely standing, and waved them through. Tommy McNair was in the radar room when someone told him a hurricane had crashed nearby. His heart stopped. He ran outside, saw the smoke rising from the field, and then he saw Andy, walking toward the radar station, uniform torn, face black with smoke, but alive. Tommy ran. Andy saw him coming, managed a smile. They met in the middle of the airfield. Tommy grabbed Andy, hugged him so hard Andy's ribs creaked. "I saw you go down," Tommy said. His voice was shaking. "Saw the fire. Thought you were dead. Thought I'd lost you." "Can't get rid of me that easily," Andy said. Then his legs gave out. Tommy caught him, lowered him to the ground. "Medic!" Tommy shouted. "I need a medic!" Andy grabbed his brother's arm. "The hurricane, did it make it? Salvageable?" Tommy looked at the smoke still rising from the field. "Andy, it's gone. Completely destroyed." Andy closed his eyes. One more hurricane lost. One less fighter for tomorrow. One more step toward defeat. "I tried," he whispered. "Tried to save it." "You saved yourself," Tommy said. "That's what matters." Andy was in hospital for 3 days. Smoke inhalation, exhaustion, minor burns. The doctors wanted to keep him longer, but he refused. The squadron needed pilots. Britain needed fighters. He was back in the air on September 7th, in a new hurricane, serial number V7483. It flew like a dream compared to the wreck he'd brought home. Andy McNair flew through the entire Battle of Britain. Shot down 11 German aircraft confirmed, 4 probable. Was shot down himself 3 more times. Walked away from all of them. He survived the war, returned to Canada in 1945, never flew again. The nightmares were too much. Every time he closed his eyes, he was back in that burning cockpit, watching the altimeter drop, wondering if he'd make it. But he'd made it. And that was what mattered. Tommy survived too. Stayed in the RAF until 1946. Became an engineer. Moved to Toronto. They lived 3 blocks apart until Andy died in 1994 at age 77. At Andy's funeral, they played a recording, his voice, from an interview he'd done in 1990 for a Battle of Britain documentary. The interviewer had asked, "What went through your mind when you realized you might not make it home?" Andy's recorded voice, 50 years older, but still recognizably his. "I thought about my brother, about the letter he'd written, about how he was counting on me to keep fighting. And I decided that I couldn't let him down. So I didn't. I flew that hurricane until it literally fell apart underneath me. And when I got home, when I saw Tommy running toward me, I knew why I'd done it. We weren't just fighting for Britain. We were fighting for each other, for the people we loved, for the chance to see them again. That's what kept me alive. Not skill, not luck. Love. The Hawker Hurricane V7467 is listed in RAF records as lost to enemy action, 3 September 1940. Pilot survived. The crash site in Kent is marked by a small stone placed by the landowner in 1985. It says simply, "Here fell Hurricane V7467. Pilot F.L.A. McNair, RCAF. He brought her home." Because that's what the hurricanes did. They brought their pilots home. And their pilots brought Britain through its darkest hour. Together. Now you. Did you know that Canadian pilots flew more than 30,000 sorties during the Battle of Britain and made up nearly 20% of RAF fighter command? Have you heard other stories about Commonwealth pilots who fought to defend a country thousands of miles from their homes? Tell me in the comments what untold stories of Canadian, Australian, New Zealand, and other Commonwealth airmen you think deserve to be remembered, because they fought a war that wasn't technically theirs, but they fought it anyway, because freedom anywhere required courage from everywhere.